There's a kind of love nobody ever thanks you for. No cards, no holidays, no special day when someone sits you down, looks you in the eye, and says, "Thank you for staying when you could have walked away." You just wake up every morning and make the same choice. You stay. I made that choice for 15 years. And then the boy I had helped raise looked me straight in the face and told me the greatest graduation gift I could give him was not showing up. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 58 years old, and I'm a truck driver from Springfield, Missouri. I've spent most of my adult life hauling freight across highways where the truck stops start feeling more familiar than your own living room. I'm not a wealthy man. Never have been. I don't own expensive clothes, and the closest thing I have to a good suit came off a clearance rack 6 years ago. But I know how to work hard, keep my word, and show up when somebody needs me. For 15 years, that was exactly what I did for a boy who wasn't mine by blood. Then, on the afternoon of his college graduation, he told me I didn't belong there. What he didn't know was that inside my jacket pocket was an envelope I had been preparing for nearly 2 years. Inside that envelope was something that could change his entire future. By the time he opened it, I was gone. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I met Laura in October of 2007 at a backyard barbecue organized by my friend Eddie. Eddie told me it was a casual cookout. He forgot to mention everybody was supposed to bring food. So I showed up with a 6-pack of soda and nothing else. Laura noticed immediately. She was standing beside a table covered with casseroles and desserts, holding an apple crisp she had baked herself. "You bring anything?" she asked. I lifted the soda. She laughed. Something about that laugh stayed with me. I had spent years living alone, driving long routes, and coming home to an empty apartment. Most evenings, I ate dinner with the television playing just so the place wouldn't feel so quiet. Then Laura laughed at one of my stupid jokes, and for the first time in years, I realized how lonely I had actually been. We started dating a few weeks later. On our third date, we were sitting in a little diner near downtown Springfield when Laura suddenly became serious. She put down her coffee. "I need to tell you something." "All right. I have a son." I waited. "He's 7. His name is Ethan." "Okay." She stared at me. "That's it. What else am I supposed to say?" "His father is still around." "Kind of. His name is Mark. We separated 4 years ago. He lives in Kansas City now and sees Ethan whenever it fits his schedule." I could hear the disappointment in her voice. Then she leaned forward. "Daniel, you need to understand what you're getting involved with. You have a kid." "Yes." "And he comes first." "Yes." I took another sip of coffee. "Seems pretty clear to me." She studied my face. "Most men hear that and eventually leave." I shrugged. "I'm still sitting here." And I kept sitting there for the next 15 years. Ethan Cole was 7 when I met him. Skinny kid. Serious eyes. Suspicious of everything. Especially me. Laura introduced us in the living room of the small house they were renting. "Ethan, this is Daniel." He looked me over like he was trying to decide whether I was worth remembering. I held out my hand. After a moment, he shook it. "Nice to meet you," I said. "Yeah." Then he walked back to his bedroom. Honestly, I respected him for it. He wasn't pretending. As far as Ethan knew, I was another man passing through his mother's life. I later learned Laura had dated someone before me. The man had tried hard with Ethan at first. Gifts, baseball games, trips for ice cream. Then the relationship ended. The man disappeared. Ethan's biological father wasn't exactly dependable either. Mark loved his son. I believe that. But loving somebody and consistently showing up are two different things. Mark made exciting promises. Weekend trips, baseball games, birthday surprises. Sometimes he came. Sometimes he didn't. By 7 years old, Ethan had already learned that adults could disappear. So I never tried convincing him that I was different. I decided I would let time do that for me. Laura and I married 3 years later. Ethan was 10. He wore a gray suit to the wedding and refused to smile in almost every photograph. There's one picture where everybody around him looks happy, while Ethan looks like he's attending a business meeting against his will. I still love that photograph because it was honest. The first couple of years after the wedding were what I'd call a respectful standoff. I never asked Ethan to call me dad. Never tried buying his affection. I just lived in the same house and did what needed doing. When Laura worked late at the medical center, I picked Ethan up from football practice. Every Monday, And Wednesday. Same time. Same parking spot. He'd climb into my pickup, throw his equipment bag on the floor, and stare through the passenger window. For nearly 2 years, we barely talked during those drives. Hungry? No. Homework? Yeah. Need help? No. All right. That was about it. Fortunately, being a truck driver teaches you to be comfortable with silence. Sometimes silence doesn't need fixing. Sometimes you just have to sit in it long enough for the other person to understand you aren't going anywhere. One cold evening, when Ethan was 12, he climbed into my truck after practice. We drove several minutes before he suddenly spoke. Coach Reynolds says parents can watch practice. I know. You never do. You told me not to. He frowned. I said you didn't have to. You also said it was weird having me there. I was 10. I glanced at him. That was only 2 years ago. He looked out the window again. Then he shrugged. You can watch if you want. 6 words. That was all. But the following Monday, I stood beside that football field in freezing weather wearing an old work jacket that wasn't nearly warm enough. I watched every minute. Ethan never looked over at me. Not once. But when practice ended and he climbed into my truck, I noticed the smallest smile. You stayed the whole time? Yep. It was freezing. I noticed. He nodded. We drove home in silence. But that silence felt different. For the first time, I thought maybe Ethan was starting to believe I might actually stay. What I didn't know was that while I was slowly building his trust, one small moment at a time, someone else was quietly teaching him not to trust me too much. That person was Laura. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't trying to destroy our relationship. She was afraid. And fear, when you carry it long enough, can start sounding a lot like common sense. It would take me years to understand what her fear was doing to Ethan. By then, he would be 22 years old, standing in our kitchen dress for his college graduation. And I would finally understand why, after 15 years of showing up, he could look me straight in the eyes and say, "You're not my father, Daniel. You never were." To understand Laura, you have to understand what her life looked like before I came along. She had been abandoned before, more than once. Ethan's father, Mark, left when Ethan was 3. One week they were talking about taking a family vacation. A few days later, Mark packed his clothes and moved to Kansas City. There was another woman involved. Laura never gave me all the details, and I never asked for them. What mattered was that she had believed Mark was permanent. Then one day, he wasn't. After Mark, Laura dated another man named Stephen. That relationship lasted about a year. Stephen was good with Ethan at first, maybe too good. He brought presents, played catch with him in the backyard, promised they would go fishing together. Then Stephen decided family life wasn't for him. He disappeared too. By the time I met Laura, she had developed a rule she never actually said out loud. Don't let Ethan get attached to a man who might leave. The problem was that she applied that rule to me before giving me the chance to prove who I was. At first, I didn't notice. The things she said were small. When Ethan was 10 and had started talking to me more, Laura would casually remind him that my work kept me on the road. Daniel has a difficult schedule, honey. Truck drivers are gone a lot. You can't always expect him to be here. Technically, that was true, but I was there when it mattered. When Ethan was 12 and I had attended every football practice I could, she would say something like, "Daniel is a good man, but life changes. People change. You should always be able to stand on your own." Again, nothing terrible. Nothing you could point at and call cruel. But little words repeated over years have weight. When Ethan was 15, something happened that I still remember clearly. We were working together in the garage, trying to fix an old lawn mower. Ethan handed me a wrench and started to say, "Dad, can you?" He stopped. His face turned red. "Daniel, can you hand me that other socket?" I pretended I hadn't noticed. Sure, but I had noticed. Of course I had. For half a second, that word had come naturally to him. Dad. Later that evening, I saw Laura talking quietly with Ethan in the hallway. I couldn't hear what she said. After that night, he never came close to calling me Dad again. For years, I told myself it didn't matter. And in one sense, it really didn't. I didn't need the title. I just wanted the boy to know I was there. What I failed to understand was that Ethan believed keeping his distance from me was protecting himself. He thought he was being smart, careful, independent. He didn't know he was carrying his mother's fear. And Laura didn't realize that by trying to protect her son from losing me someday, she was preventing him from fully having me while I was still there. So I kept doing the only thing I knew how to do. I showed up. I drove him to practice, signed school forms, sat through football games in the rain, helped with homework when he allowed me, stayed awake when he had the flu, fixed his first car, taught him how to change a tire. I never kept score. At least I tried not to. Now I need to tell you about a man named Frank Dawson. Frank and I had known each other since high school. We played football together, worked summers at the same lumberyard, and got ourselves into enough trouble that both our fathers knew the local sheriff by first name. After graduation, our lives went in different directions. I became a truck driver. Frank went to college, then law school. Eventually, he returned to Springfield and opened a successful firm called Dawson, Miller and Price. Frank was the kind of friend you could call in the middle of the night. We didn't see each other every week. Sometimes months passed, but the friendship never changed. Ethan, meanwhile, had decided he wanted to become a lawyer. He enrolled at Missouri State University and studied political science with plans for law school afterward. And he was good, really good. I'd hear him practicing arguments at the kitchen table. He had this ability to take a complicated problem and pull it apart piece by piece until suddenly everything made sense. When Ethan was 19, I mentioned him to Frank over lunch. Not asking for anything, just talking. I told him about Ethan's grades and how serious he was about law. Frank put down his sandwich. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you should know his name." Frank smiled. "That kid still calls you Daniel?" "Yep. And you're still doing all this?" I shrugged. "Somebody should." Frank stared at me for a second. Then he nodded. "When he gets closer to graduation, send me his records." That was all. Over the next 3 years, I kept Frank updated. Ethan made the dean's list. I told Frank. Ethan won a regional debate competition. I told Frank. Ethan landed an internship with a local legal aid organization. I told Frank. Never pushed. Never asked for favors. By Ethan's senior year, Frank had quietly arranged something I knew could change the boy's life. A paid position at his firm while Ethan prepared for law school. Good salary, benefits, flexible hours, real experience working alongside attorneys. Frank had turned down other candidates. When I asked why he was willing to do that, he looked at me and said, "Daniel, you've been my friend for almost 40 years, and you've never asked me for anything. Let me at least give the kid a chance." I almost corrected him, almost said he's not my kid, but I didn't, because somewhere along the way, whether Ethan knew it or not, that was exactly what he had become to me. The job wasn't the only surprise I had planned. For years, Ethan had talked about owning a dark gray Ford Mustang. He pretended it was just a car, but I knew better. When he was 16, he had a photograph of one taped inside his closet door. He probably thought nobody noticed. I noticed. I started putting money aside. Extra routes, weekend deliveries, holiday runs nobody else wanted. For almost 3 years, I saved. Eventually, I had enough for a large down payment on a used Mustang in almost perfect condition. I bought it 6 months before graduation and kept it hidden in Frank's garage. The job offer and the car key went into a white envelope. I kept that envelope hidden in my dresser. Laura knew nothing about it. Neither did Ethan. I wanted to hand it to him after graduation. No big speech. No audience. Just something from me to him. A way of saying, "I saw you. I paid attention. And I'm proud of the man you became." Graduation morning arrived warm and clear. Ethan was 22. His biological father, Mark, was driving down from Kansas City. It was the first time he had visited in more than a year. All morning, Ethan kept checking his phone. "Dad says he's about an hour away." Dad. I had heard Ethan use that word for Mark thousands of times. It never bothered me. At least, that's what I always told myself. I was in the kitchen cleaning the counter before we left. My good jacket was hanging beside the front door. The white envelope was inside the pocket. I heard Ethan coming downstairs. When I turned around, he was standing there in his graduation clothes. For a moment, I forgot everything else. All I could see was the 7-year-old boy who had once shaken my hand and disappeared into his bedroom. Now he was a grown man. I smiled. "You look good, kid." He didn't smile back. "Daniel, I need to ask you something." Something in his voice made me put down the dish towel. "All right." He took a breath. Then he said the words that would change everything between us. The best graduation gift you could give me today is not coming. I stared at him. He continued before I could answer. My dad is going to be there. My family is going to be there. Then he looked directly at me. You're not my father, Daniel. You never were. The kitchen went completely silent. I could hear the refrigerator humming behind me and the faint ticking of the clock over the doorway. For a few seconds, I honestly thought I had misunderstood him. What did you say? Ethan looked uncomfortable, but he didn't back down. I just think it would be better if you didn't come. Better for who? He looked toward the stairs. My dad's coming. We haven't all been together like this in a long time. I don't want things to feel awkward. I nodded slowly. There it was. His dad. Mark. The man who had missed birthdays, football games, school events, and entire stretches of his son's life was coming to graduation. And apparently, after 15 years of showing up, I was the one who might make things awkward. Ethan must have seen something change in my face. Daniel, don't make this into something bigger than it is. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked him one question. Is this really what you want? He hesitated, just for a second. Then he nodded. Yes. I looked at him for a long moment. All right. He seemed surprised. Maybe he expected an argument. Maybe he expected me to remind him about every football practice, every late-night drive, every time I'd stayed up waiting for him to come home. I could have listed 15 years of reasons why I deserved one seat in that arena. But love isn't a bill you hand somebody when payment is due. So I said nothing. Ethan adjusted his jacket. Thanks for understanding. Then he turned and walked upstairs. I stood there staring at the empty doorway. That was when I noticed Laura. She was standing in the hallway. She had heard everything. I knew it immediately from the expression on her face. For 1 second, our eyes met. I waited. I don't know exactly what I expected. Maybe I wanted her to call Ethan back downstairs. Maybe I wanted her to say, that man has been raising you since you were 7. Maybe just one sentence. Anything. Instead, Laura looked away. Then she followed her son upstairs. That hurt more than Ethan's words. Ethan was 22 years old, but part of him was still that frightened little boy who had learned not to trust men who promised to stay. Laura knew better. She knew every mile I had driven, every sacrifice, every time I had chosen our family. And when the moment came to stand beside me, she chose silence. Suddenly, things I had ignored for years started fitting together. The little warnings. The reminders that people leave. The way Ethan would move closer to me and then suddenly pull away. The night he almost called me Dad. I finally understood. Laura had spent 15 years preparing Ethan for the day I would abandon him. She had been so afraid I might leave that she never allowed him to believe I could stay. And now I was standing in my own kitchen, feeling like a guest whose invitation had expired. I walked to the front door. My jacket was still hanging there. I reached into the inside pocket and pulled out the white envelope. For nearly 2 years, I had imagined handing it to Ethan. I had imagined his face when he read Frank's offer. I had imagined taking him outside and showing him the Mustang. None of that was going to happen now. I placed the envelope on the kitchen table. Then I took the car key from my pocket and set on top. I found a piece of paper and wrote a short note. No accusations. No speech about everything I had done. Just a few lines. Ethan, the job offer inside is real. Frank has been holding the position for you. The Mustang is parked at his house. The key is yours. Neither gift comes with conditions. Congratulations on graduating. Drive carefully. Daniel. I folded the note and placed it inside the envelope. Then I went to the bedroom. Laura and I had another conversation coming. But not that day. I knew if I stayed, I would either say too much or accept too little. So I packed a small bag. A few shirts, jeans, work clothes, my shaving kit. Before leaving, I wrote Laura a letter. Hers was longer. Laura, I know why you did it. Maybe I didn't understand at first, but eventually I did. You were afraid I would leave. Mark left. Stephen left. You decided you would never let Ethan depend too much on another man because you couldn't watch him go through that pain again. I don't hate you for being afraid. But somewhere along the way, you stopped protecting Ethan from losing me and started protecting him from loving me. There's a difference. For 15 years, you waited for me to prove your fear right. I never did. Today, Ethan asked me not to attend one of the most important moments of his life. You heard him. and you said nothing. That silence told me something I should have understood years ago. I can't spend the rest of my life proving I'm not leaving to people who have already decided I don't belong. The house payments are covered for the next 6 months. You'll have time to decide what comes next. Please tell Ethan the job and the car are still his. I never gave them to him so he would love me. I gave them because I love him. Daniel. I left the letter open on the table beside Ethan's envelope. I put on my jacket. Nobody came downstairs. Nobody saw me leave. I closed the front door quietly behind me. I didn't drive far. About 25 minutes outside Springfield, there was a gravel turnout near a small lake where I sometimes stopped when I needed to think. I parked there and shut off the engine. For the first time in years, I had nowhere I needed to be. I should have been sitting in an arena watching Ethan walk across the stage. Instead, I sat alone in my truck. I kept thinking about that 7-year-old boy shaking my hand, about football practices, driving lessons, birthday cakes, arguments, quiet dinners. 15 years. Had any of it mattered? I didn't know. That evening, Ethan graduated with Mark sitting in the audience. Afterward, they went to dinner with Laura and several relatives. According to what I learned later, Mark spent most of dinner telling stories. Ethan laughed. Laura barely spoke. They returned home shortly before midnight. Ethan was still carrying his graduation gown over one arm when he walked into the kitchen. Then he stopped. The house felt different. My jacket was gone. My work boots weren't beside the door. And on the kitchen table, under the light I had deliberately left on, were 2 letters. Laura saw hers first, but Ethan reached for the white envelope. He opened it. The first thing he saw was the letterhead from Dawson, Miller & Price. He started reading. A paid position, benefits, flexible hours, direct experience with the firm's attorneys. At the bottom was a handwritten note from Frank. Ethan, this position has been waiting for you for almost a year. Daniel first spoke to me about you when you were 19. Everything he told me turned out to be true. Call me Monday. Ethan read it twice. Then he noticed the car key. He looked at Laura. What is this? She couldn't answer. He found my note. Read it. Then read it again. A few minutes later, Ethan called Frank. It was nearly midnight. Frank answered. Is this real? Ethan asked. Yes. How long has Daniel been planning this? There was silence on the other end. Then Frank said, longer than you probably want to know tonight. Ethan slowly sat down at the kitchen table. And for the first time in 15 years, he began doing something nobody had ever asked him to do. He started adding everything up. Ethan stayed at the kitchen table for a long time. The job offer was still in his hands. The car key lay beside it. Neither one felt real. He looked across at Laura. How long? She blinked. What? How long has Daniel been planning this? Laura lowered her eyes. I don't know exactly. That isn't what I asked. She tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. Ethan had inherited something from both of us. From Mark, he got stubbornness. From me, he learned patience. So he simply waited. Finally, Laura whispered, almost 2 years. Ethan looked back at the offer letter. 2 years. That meant Daniel had been quietly planning his future while expecting absolutely nothing in return. He slowly shook his head. I told him not to come. Laura closed her eyes. I know, and he still did all this. I know. Ethan stood up and walked to the front window. His graduation excitement had disappeared. Instead, memories started coming back one after another. The football practices, the rides home, the nights Daniel stayed awake when he had pneumonia. The Saturday mornings spent teaching him how to drive in an empty parking lot. The afternoon Daniel drove 3 hours to rescue him after his old pickup broke down outside Columbia without complaining even once. None of those memories had anything to do with obligation. Daniel had simply shown up. Again, and again, and again. Ethan turned back toward his mother. What? Laura frowned. Why what? Why did you always tell me not to depend on him? She stared at the table. I was trying to protect you. From what? From getting hurt. He never hurt me. No, but I thought someday he would. The room became quiet. Laura took a deep breath. I believed every man eventually leaves. Ethan slowly sat back down. So you kept telling me not to get too attached. She nodded. I thought I was helping. You were teaching me not to trust the only man who never gave me a reason to doubt him. Tears filled Laura's eyes. I know. No. Ethan shook his head. I don't think you do. For the first time in years, Laura stopped trying to defend herself. She simply cried. Not dramatic sobbing. Just quiet tears from someone who suddenly realized that fear had been making decisions for her longer than she cared to admit. After several minutes, Ethan spoke again. Did Daniel know? Laura hesitated. Yes. How long? I don't know. But I think he figured it out years ago. Ethan covered his face with both hands. And he never said anything? No. Why? Laura looked toward Daniel's empty chair. Because he loved you more than he wanted to be right. That sentence hit Ethan harder than anything else she had said. He walked outside. The warm evening air suddenly felt cold. He sat on the front steps until almost sunrise. The next Monday morning, instead of celebrating graduation, Ethan drove to Frank Dawson's law office. Frank was already waiting. You made it, Frank said. I almost didn't. Frank smiled gently. I had a feeling you'd come. They sat inside Frank's office. The job offer was still on the desk between them. Ethan finally asked the question that had been bothering him all night. When did Daniel first talk to you about me? Frank leaned back. When you were 19. 3 years ago. Frank nodded. He came to see me after one of your debate competitions. Ethan stared in disbelief. He never told me. He wasn't doing it for recognition. Frank opened one of his desk drawers and removed a small folder. I wasn't planning to show you this yet. Inside were handwritten notes, dates, recommendations, copies of emails. Every few months, there was another update. Dean's list, excellent internship review, top grades in constitutional law, outstanding public speaking skills. Each page was in Daniel's handwriting. Ethan slowly turned them over. There were dozens of them. He kept all of this. Frank nodded. Every time something good happened in your life, he'd stop by or call me. Why? So I'd know exactly who I was hiring. Ethan swallowed hard. I told him he wasn't my father. Frank didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood up and walked to a bookshelf. From a top shelf, he picked up a framed photograph. I've been holding on to this too. It was an old picture from the county fair. Ethan couldn't have been older than 11. He was laughing while riding one of those spinning carnival attractions. In the background, almost out of frame, stood Daniel. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at Ethan, smiling. Not because anyone was watching him. Not because he expected credit. Just because seeing that little boy happy made him happy too. Frank placed the picture in front of Ethan. Daniel gave me this almost a year ago. A year. He said if the time ever came when you questioned whether he loved you, I should give you this. Ethan picked up the frame with trembling hands. On the back was a short sentence written in Daniel's familiar handwriting. Some of the best moments of my life happened when he didn't even know I was watching. Ethan couldn't hold back anymore. For the first time since he was a little boy, he cried. Not because he had lost someone, because he finally understood what he had almost thrown away. Ethan didn't call me that day, or the next. I was glad he didn't. Some conversations shouldn't happen while emotions are still running hot. People say things because they're scared, ashamed, or desperate to fix everything in 5 minutes. 15 years couldn't be understood in one phone call. I went back to work. 3 days after the graduation, I picked up a load heading toward Oklahoma City. After that came Tulsa, then Little Rock. Driving helped. There's something about having hundreds of miles of highway in front of you that gives your mind room to sort itself out. Laura called several times. I didn't answer at first. Eventually, I sent her a message. I'm safe. I just need some time. She replied almost immediately. I understand. For once, neither of us had anything else to say. About 7 weeks passed. Then, one afternoon, I was parked at a truck stop outside Joplin, eating what was supposed to be a chicken sandwich. My phone started ringing. I looked at the screen. Ethan. I stared at his name through 2 full rings before answering. Hello. Silence. Then I heard him breathe. Daniel? Yeah. Another pause. I got the job. I heard. Frank told you. He did. Ethan cleared his throat. I start Monday. That's good. Yeah. Neither of us knew where to go from there. Finally, Ethan said, I think I owe you dinner. I leaned back in my seat. You definitely do. He laughed. It was nervous but real. I'm serious. So am I. You're paying. This time he laughed harder. For some reason, hearing that laugh loosened something inside me. "All right," he said. "When are you back?" "Friday." "Saturday?" "Saturday works." We met at a barbecue place on the south side of Springfield. I arrived 10 minutes early. Ethan was already there. That surprised me. He stood when I walked toward the table. For a second, we just looked at each other. Then he stepped forward and hugged me. It wasn't graceful. Ethan had never been a naturally affectionate person. Neither had I. But that hug was real. His arms tightened around my back like he needed proof I was actually standing there. When he pulled away, his eyes were wet. "Sorry. Don't apologize for hugging an old truck driver. That's not what I meant." "I know." We sat down. For the first few minutes, we talked about safe things. His new job, my routes, the Mustang. He loved the car. Of course he did. Then our food arrived, and Ethan stopped pretending we were there to discuss barbecue. I was wrong. I looked at him. "You were hurt. That doesn't make what I said right." "No." He nodded. "I told you that you weren't my father." I remember. His eyes dropped to the table. "I spent my whole life thinking being careful meant not needing you." I waited. "Mom told me everything. I figured she might. She said she kept warning me because she thought you'd leave." I nodded. "I knew." Ethan looked up. "That's what I don't understand." "What?" "You knew what she was doing. Eventually. And you stayed." "Yes." "Why?" I thought about that question. There were probably 100 answers. But only one mattered. "Because you didn't need me to win an argument with your mother." He frowned slightly. "You needed me to be there." Ethan stared at me. "So I was." He looked down at his coffee. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "You were." Those 2 words meant more to me than Dad ever could have. We talked for nearly 3 hours. About everything. Ethan told me there had been times when he wanted to get closer to me, but felt guilty about it. Like accepting me, somehow, meant betraying Mark. Laura's warnings only made that confusion worse. "I kept waiting for you to leave," he admitted. "I know. Did that hurt?" "Sometimes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you were a kid." "I wasn't always a kid." "No. But by the time you were old enough to understand, the pattern was already there." He rubbed his hands together. "I don't know how to fix 15 years. "You don't." He looked surprised. "You can't go backward, Ethan. So what do we do?" "We start from here." That seemed to settle something in him. We began meeting for lunch once a month. Sometimes twice. At first, Ethan insisted on paying every time. He called it repayment. I told him he couldn't repay 15 years with cheeseburgers. He said he was willing to try. Slowly, our relationship changed. Not dramatically. There was no movie moment where suddenly everything became perfect. Real relationships don't work that way. Trust grows the same way it was lost. One small moment at a time. Ethan called me when he had a difficult day at work. I called him when I was passing through Springfield. He asked my opinion before buying furniture for his apartment. I asked him legal questions I could easily have looked up myself. We were learning each other again, this time without fear standing between us. Laura and I eventually talked too. That conversation was harder. She apologized. Not once. Many times. I told her I believed she had been trying to protect Ethan. But good intentions don't erase consequences. She understood. At least, I think she finally did. Our marriage didn't return to what it had been. Too much had changed. Maybe the truth was that some of those changes had started years earlier and we had simply refused to see them. But we learned to speak honestly. For the first time, Laura admitted something that surprised me. I wasn't only afraid Ethan would lose you. I looked at her. I was afraid I would too. That was when I finally understood the whole thing. Laura had spent years expecting abandonment, so she kept part of herself prepared for it. She had done the same thing to Ethan. And eventually, she created exactly the distance she had feared. Fear can do that. If you feed it long enough, it starts building the future you were trying to avoid. Months later, I visited Ethan at a law firm. Frank walked me past his office. The door was open. Ethan wasn't there. But on his desk, surrounded by legal files and stacks of paperwork, was the photograph from the county fair. It hadn't moved. I stood in the doorway looking at it. 11-year-old Ethan laughing. Me in the background watching him. Frank stood beside me. He keeps it there all the time. I smiled. Good picture. Frank laughed. You're terrible at pretending things don't matter to you. Occupational skill. Before leaving, I looked at that photograph one more time. For 15 years, I thought I was waiting for Ethan to understand what he meant to me. What I hadn't realized was that maybe I needed to understand something too. Being a father isn't always about what somebody calls you. Sometimes it's simply about being the man who stays long enough for them to finally understand that you meant it. A year has passed since Ethan's graduation. I'm still driving trucks, still waking up before sunrise, still drinking coffee that tastes like somebody filtered hot water through an old work boot, still spending more nights than I'd like parked under the bright lights of truck stops. Some things don't change, but some things do. Ethan is doing well at Dawson, Miller, and Price. Better than well, according to Frank. The first few months were hard. Ethan discovered pretty quickly that being smart in college and being useful inside a law firm are two completely different things. He made mistakes, worked late, called me more than once just to complain. I usually listened. That's something I learned during all those silent drives home from football practice. People don't always need advice. Sometimes they just need someone who won't hang up. Frank tells me Ethan has something many young people in that business don't. Patience. He listens before he speaks. He watches people. He pays attention to small details. Frank once told me, I wonder where he learned that. I told him I had no idea. Frank laughed. Ethan still drives the Mustang. Dark gray. Exactly the kind he wanted when he was 16. He keeps it cleaner than I expected. The first month he owned it, I think he washed the thing more times than I've washed my truck in 5 years. Every once in a while, he sent me a photograph. Usually after he's cleaned it. The message is always the same. Still running. And I always reply, try keeping it that way. We still meet for lunch. Once a month if my routes cooperate. Sometimes more. He still tries to pay. I usually let him. He says he's working through what he calls the backlog. Apparently, according to Ethan's calculations, he owes me approximately 15 years of meals. I told him that at one lunch. You're going to go broke. He smiled. I'm a lawyer now. You're an assistant at a law firm. Future lawyer. Still broke. He laughed. That laugh has become easier. That might be one of my favorite changes. Ethan doesn't carry himself like someone waiting for people to disappear anymore. Not all the time, anyway. Some habits take longer to unlearn. Sometimes I see the old hesitation. He'll ask me if I'm coming to something and then immediately add, but it's fine if you can't. I always notice. Whenever possible, I go. Not because I'm trying to prove anything. I think we're finally past that. I go because I want to. Laura and I eventually separated. There wasn't one dramatic argument. No screaming. No broken dishes. Just two people finally admitting that something between them had changed. I don't hate her. I want that understood. For years, I could have turned Laura into the villain of this story. That would have made everything easier. But life isn't usually divided into heroes and villains. Laura loved Ethan. Everything she did came from wanting to protect him. The problem was that fear became stronger than trust. She spent years preparing for me to leave. Eventually, she created a home where staying became impossible. That doesn't make her evil. It makes her human. Last I heard, she started seeing a counselor. Ethan encouraged her. Maybe that will help her understand that protecting yourself from every possible heartbreak means protecting yourself from a lot of love too. Ethan and Laura are still working through their relationship. That belongs to them. I stay out of it. Mark is still around occasionally. Ethan sees him. I've never asked him not to. Mark is his biological father. Nothing that happened between Ethan and me changes that. There was a time when I thought there was only room for one father in a person's life. I don't believe that anymore. Love doesn't work like seats on a bus. Someone else getting one doesn't mean you have to lose yours. About 3 months ago, Ethan called me while I was driving through northern Arkansas. Where are you? About 40 miles from nowhere. Helpful. What do you need? He hesitated. There's a dinner at the firm next Friday. Okay. Frank's giving out some awards. Congratulations. I didn't say I was getting one. You wouldn't be calling if you weren't. He laughed. Then there was a pause. I want you there. For words. Nothing complicated. But I had to grip the steering wheel a little tighter. What time? 7. I'll be there. This time, nobody had to convince me I belonged. When I arrived that Friday, Ethan was waiting near the entrance. He was wearing a suit. A better one than mine. He walked over and shook my hand. Then he smiled. Glad you made it. Wouldn't miss it. During dinner, Frank gave Ethan an award for outstanding work with a local legal aid program. When Ethan's name was called, he stood. Everybody applauded. So did I. Before walking toward the front of the room, Ethan looked directly at me. Just for a second. That was enough. I thought about his graduation, the kitchen, the white envelope, the words that had hurt more than I wanted to admit. You're not my father. You never were. A year earlier, I thought those words were the end of our story. They weren't. Sometimes people need to lose the certainty of your presence before they understand what that presence meant. I wish Ethan had understood sooner. I wish Laura had trusted me. I wish I had spoken up more. But regret is like carrying extra cargo. Eventually, you have to decide whether you're going to keep hauling it. These days, I keep a copy of that county fair photograph above the passenger side visor in my truck. Sometimes, early in the morning, when the highway is empty and the sky starts turning purple at the edges, I look at it. Ethan is 11 years old, laughing, completely unaware that someone is watching him. And there I am in the background, watching him like a proud father. For years, I told myself I didn't have a right to use that word. Father. After all, we didn't share blood. He had never called me dad. But I understand something now that I didn't understand then. Blood can make you related to someone. Showing up makes you family. I was there when Ethan needed a ride. I was there when he was sick. I was there when he won. I was there when he failed. I was there when he pushed me away. And when he finally came back, I was there for that too. Maybe that's what being a father really is. Not demanding a title. Not keeping score. Not presenting someone with an invoice for everything you sacrificed. Just being there. Again and again. Until one day they look back and realize you never left. Ethan called me last Sunday. We talked for about 20 minutes. Before hanging up, he said something unusual. Love you, Daniel. I went quiet. He noticed. You still there? Yeah. You gonna say it back? I smiled. Love you too, son. Neither of us mentioned the word son. We didn't need to. After we hung up, I sat alone in the cab of my truck for a few minutes. Then I pulled down the visor. There was that photograph. That skinny 11-year-old boy laughing at the county fair. I smiled. All those years, I thought I was waiting for Ethan to finally see me as his father. Turns out, I had been his father long before either of us was brave enough to say it. And if there's one thing I learned from everything that happened, it's this. Sometimes the people who love us most aren't the ones who share our blood. They're the ones who keep showing up when they have every reason to walk away. So let me ask you something. If you had given 15 years of your life to raising a child who wasn't biologically yours, only to hear them say you weren't their real parent on the most important day of their life, would you have walked away for good? Or would you have found the strength to leave the door open one last time?